So, Dr. Stan Korosi is a colleague of mine from my university, where we study child psychological abuse related to parental alienation. But Dr. Korosi, he is a consultant clinical sociologist specialising in PA. He's a member of the Parental Alienation Study Group. Well, he's actually on the board of the Parental Alienation Study Group. He's developed a social perspective on parental alienation through his doctoral research. And Dr. Korosi is a consultant, an expert. He has a doctorate in sociology and a master's in counselling. He's developed a social perspective that informs his work with families. Dr. Korosi is a member of, I'm repeating myself there, and continues to educate practitioners on how to address this complex issue. Dr. Korosi completed his research doctorate in sociology, specialising in parental alienation as a social issue. His research highlights social alienation and stigmatisation in family settings as social factors that lead families to exclude a parent unilaterally. He's also the principal of Dialogue in Growth, providing parental alienation and parent-child affiliation consulting. His consulting practice offers specialist assessment and remediation services in the Family Court of Australia in severe cases of parental alienation that involve child psychological abuse and coercive family violence. Dr. Stan Korosi is also on the board of the Dads in Distress and Mums in Distress and Grandparents in Distress, with the overarching umbrella of Beyond Breakup here in Australia. So he's also on the board in there. So let's listen to what Dr. Korosi says. He's also an adult child of PA himself, and he's also a targeted father who does not see his children, is not allowed. So they have been poisoned against him very seriously. So he lives and breathes this topic, as do I. And I'm honoured to have him speaking today on this subject because he's a very, very knowledgeable expert in this field. So, yeah.
All right, let's begin.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be with you today. I can't even be with you virtually. I have to record this because I simply can't be available in time. So thank you for making the time to attend, and I hope I've got something interesting to say. Those of you who have looked at the book and read the book, Children Are Not Weapons, will have seen my piece there on being shaken and not stirred by my lived experience of alienation when I was growing up, and then subsequently when I became a parent. So in my life as a child, I became aware simply by my external contact with friends that my family was simply weird. Later on, when I did a lot of therapy and learned how to be a therapist, I learned that all families are weird, each in their own weird way, and some are weirder and stranger than others. But not all of them, all of those weird ways of being actually work particularly well. So little did I know that I was being set up to fail. And little did I know that when I resolved to do something about it for other parents, when I couldn't help myself, the problem hasn't gone away. If anything, it's getting worse. So I wrote my piece about being shaken and not stirred, because here I am today, as here you all are today, as living witnesses to the emotional and relational horror that unfolded for us as children, and in some cases as parents as well. And being a witness to what happened means that not only have we survived, but we've thrived. And so, yes, I was shaken up, you were shaken up, we were stirred, but not so much. And our job now is to do the shaking and do the stirring. Our job is to make sure this practice of alienating parent-child relationships stops here. So why is it, or how is it that this keeps happening? Because we published this book. It's a litany of horror stories of what's happened to us and how we've managed to thrive and grow stronger from the experience. Remember, that which does not destroy us makes us stronger. If I hear that one more time, I'll probably strangle someone, but it's basically true, at least for me. So how do we change? How do we leverage the work that we've done, use this platform to make changes on the ground and in the institutions and professions that weren't there for us when it happened, and weren't there for us when it happened to our children? The first, what's happening? There are many family law jurisdictions around the world that have removed the presumption of equal shared parenting, or more specifically, a rebuttable presumption of equal shared parenting, so that shared parenting is supported when it's safe to do so. And that's driven by politics and ideology. There are people out there who think that the family and family relationships no longer have a role to play in society, that families are a site of oppression, a site of abuse, a site of patriarchy, in the case of extreme feminist ideology. And I distinguish between feminism and extreme feminism. I have many women in my life, friends and colleagues and a partner, and they're all feminists. They all want equity and equality. Extreme feminists want more than that. They want power in their own right. And in fact, in the 1970s, there was an ideology, a way of thinking in extreme feminist circles, that women were better at managing social resources than men, that families were sites of patriarchy and male oppression of women, and therefore we should abolish the family. And I think that thinking has continued today through our university sector, and now it's translated into family laws and family violence laws. And these extreme ideologies have gone flying under the radar, and here we are with family violence legislation and family laws that don't reflect the needs of children to have both of their parents and family members in their lives. Thing to remember, and many of you and us would know that, is that not only are we alienated from one of our parents, but from everyone on their side of the family. And in some cases, that's happened for our children. But in the case of these extreme ideologies that I think have permeated through our legal and professional systems, they don't care about that, because they don't see a need for family relationships. They have some mystical, theorised, rose-coloured glasses view of what's in the child's best interests that doesn't necessarily include a relationship with their parents. If families and parents only knew how these people think and how they interpret the laws that they're supposed to apply and administer, I think they would be truly shocked, because professionals and practitioners working in family law systems and family violence jurisdictions don't share the same idea of what a family is that you do. And herein lies all the problems. So what happened to us as children, what happened to us as parents, keeps happening today more and more. One, because society has fundamentally changed, especially since the 1980s. The nature of families has changed since the 1980s. But just because the nature of families has changed doesn't mean that there's no longer a role for family relationships for children. It is, of course, their right to have those relationships according to the United Nations Charter of the Rights of the Child and according to the European Court of Human Rights. I would say that these rights are more honoured in the breach. But going forward, we need to use this platform, use our lived experience, especially those of us with lived experience and professional practice, a very powerful combination, We need to effect change. Now, more than 12 years ago when I entered this field, I made a decision after a stunning lack of success trying to persuade and educate professionals that I should work at the grassroots, work with the people who are actually affected, who are suffering from the trauma of being alienated from their children. So I was working with parents and I was trying to find ways of empowering them, to give them the narrative, to explain their experience, to shape their evidence in a way that people could hear it when they were deaf to all other ways of understanding what the process of alienation was. And so those parents started talking to their legal practitioners and their professionals saying, well, why don't you know anything about this? Haven't you read what so-and-so's had to say? Don't you realise that there are evidence-based ways of remediating alienation? Don't you understand that alienation is just another form of child psychological abuse, another form of coercive control? And yet, even so, despite that groundswell of change, we are still blocked by pervasive political and ideological beliefs, and in many cases, a complete lack of professional education. And so we have to start agitating for change. We have to start educating, identifying how people go about doing their assessments, formulating their cases. What are the underlying presumptions and ideas that they hold true that don't fit with mainstream society's views of what a family is? There are many cases in our family law systems now where judges think it's okay for a 12-year-old or even younger to choose whether they will going to see a parent or not. Yet these children can't choose to go to school, sometimes can't even choose what clothes they put on in the morning, and don't get to choose what food they don't eat at dinner. They can't drive a car, and they can't vote in elections. And yet they're given enormous power to make a decision that will affect them throughout their lifetime. Many of us know that to be an alienating behaviour, and yet our social and legal institutions actually support it. So we have to call that out as institutional abuse. We know that because it happened to us, and we have our own experience to draw on. I've eyeballed many judges in courtrooms, correcting them when their ideas don't quite match what the evidence supports, pushing back on cross-examination questions that try to prove that the world is flat when we know it's round. For all those practitioners, academics and researchers out there who say that parental alienation is junk science and a pseudo concept, they are simply enabling abuse. They also hold political views and ideological views, whether they realise it or not, that go against what family relationships are about. They don't like the concept of parental alienation that holds them accountable. Because in the field of alienation, we ask people to demonstrate the authenticity and the genuineness of their claims. People who are claiming to be alienated from a parent or alienated from a child have to show, by example, the types of behaviours that they've been exposed to. They need to give examples of what's happened. And we need to rule out the possibility that they have contributed to their own rejection or contributed to the rejecting. Our fierce opponents who think this is junk science don't like that, because they think that children who speak about abuse, sexual abuse, family violence are always telling the truth because they're children. As children, we can't lie. And I would say, well, that's true. Children aren't lying. They're not speaking with their own voice either. Those of us inculcated into that hermetic world of an alienating parent know exactly what that's like. We know that no other ideas enter our world than the ones our alienating parent put to us as a condition of a relationship with us. Many people don't like that concept because it challenges their ideas that children, women and children, always tell the truth about abuse. and child sexual abuse in particular. Now, they're not the only ones. Fathers do the same thing, alienating fathers. They make up claims about mothers being mentally unwell and too dangerous to be around children. And oddly enough, despite the laws that supposedly protect women and children, in my experience, men have been more likely to get their children back with family law action than women. It's not quite working out the way they thought. One of the things we know about oppressive political and ideological systems, including those that dilute, if not remove, the idea of family and family relationships from our society, is that eventually they harm the people they're trying to protect. Every oppressive regime starts out championing the underdog, the oppressed, and eventually turns on those oppressed and uses them without mercy, sacrifices them for the sake of the ideology. That practice was well known in the former Soviet Union and the practices of the Committee for State Security, also known as the KGB. Some would say it was also a practice of Western democratic intelligence services like the CIA, MI5, probably our own here in Australia, who shall go unnamed for obvious reasons. So we need to think of what we've been through in political terms as being oppressed and suppressed because our parents, or the parents who did this to us and are doing it to our children and doing it to other children, feel they have a social license to do what they do. And where do they get that from? Well, there's nothing in our laws that say you can't do it. Here in Australia or elsewhere in the world, they've removed the rebuttable presumptions of equal shared parenting. They've removed the provisions in those laws that document that interfering with a child's relationship with their family members is a form of abuse. They have changed the notion of the children's best interests to something vague and ideological that allows parents to be excluded from children's lives on the whim of a judge because a professional who writes an independent report for the family court can say that a parent is simply not necessary. The child is doing okay with the one parent, regardless of whether that parent is an alienating, harmful, and abusive one. We also see another practice that's quite disturbing. It's very common for alienated children to threaten suicide or to indicate that they would be psychologically disturbed or develop anxiety disorders if there was any attempt to place them in contact with the parent they were coerced to reject. And on that basis, many practitioners say, yes, the rejected parent's a good enough parent, but it's simply too harmful to the child to try and resurrect a relationship with them. Let's leave them where they are. And in that way, the state institutions, our legal institutions, actually empower and support the practice of alienation, the practice of child psychological abuse. That's where the social license comes in. So alienating parents do alienating behaviours because they can. The best way they can leverage the outcomes they want, which is to get rid of the other parent and claim the child as their own, is to make allegations of family violence and child sexual abuse and mental health conditions because they know that will immediately trigger state-based child protective action. So it's a fundamental abusive process which our legal systems have opened themselves up to by subscribing to political views, ideological views, that family relationships aren't all that important. Again, we need to change that. We need to call out those paradigms, those patterns of thinking as being fundamentally wrong and harmful. Again, our job, not to be shaken, but to do the shaking, do the stirring. Work from the grassroots up. Thank you for listening to me. I'm proud to be amongst you. Thank you. I'm proud to be a thriver, and I hope you all thrive too. Thank you. Bye for now.
Oh my goodness,
Well,
that was phenomenal, right? Right?
yeah,
I wish he were here today. Truly.
yes.
You are missed. You are missed, Dan. Thank you so much for that. Dawn and Dr. Elise and Sashim, what were your points that really stuck out with what he shared?
Well, for me, I think it was the fact that he called out family courts enabling this. And that's exactly what they do. And nobody wants to, the reason, I guess, yeah, why they're trying to reject it is because that will hold people accountable. And maybe when people are held accountable, maybe they'll stop engaging in these behaviors, but nothing's going to change until that happens, right? And these kids, in the meantime, are struggling, and we're trying so hard to stop these patterns from continuing. And anyway, that's what stood out for me a lot. But his whole speech was great.
Truly. And Dr. Elise, your thoughts?
Well, I'm very, very familiar with Stan's work. So, and he's also a clinical psychotherapist like me. So we're very, very similar, Stan and I do work with him a lot. And he is on the front line in the family court system, and that's a dangerous place to be. So he's a very, very brave individual fighting for the rights of the child and the targeted parent as well. And he's got a position that a lot of people he's very knowledgeable of what he's talking about, and what he says is absolutely 100% accurate. And when he says that these children, they can, they have trouble cleaning their rooms and getting dressed and cooking, like having dinners and all these things, yet they are given the right to decide whether they want to see a parent or not. It's like, are you guys joking? And the other thing that we often hear is, once they're 18, everything's going to be just fine with these kids. Well, we're here today to tell you all that that is absolutely generally not true. Even in actually, you know what? I'll show you something really interesting. It's actually a good moment. So this is Patricia Riley's book. It's called Serpent Child. So Patricia Riley is an adult child of parental alienation, but she put this out in 2019, but Patricia Riley, who I've just been speaking to recently, she is quite elderly. So parental alienation has been going on long before 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and she was experiencing it as a child. And this book talks about it. So it's the autobiography of Patricia, and it describes the life of a child of separated parents in post-war Britain at a time when children were still seen but not heard, and when even for married parents, children were preferably seen somewhere else. And she writes, many children were hurried off to boarding schools, even at a very tender age. And if they were noticed at all, children could become pawns in harmful, even dangerous parental war games. In an enlightening, at times humorous, and an important book, Pat describes a past that is not always past. So she is quite elderly, and she still lives with the effects of what happened to her in post-war Britain. So we need to understand this is such a long-term issue, and we've really got to stop studying it and fixing it now, because the studying it is over. I think we've studied it enough. I think the adult child survivors we need to really seriously look at, but I think a lot of the research is focused on the children for so long now that we need to move into the adult child survivors. And Patricia talks about that and what her experiences were. And, you know, she's in her 70s. So this is not a new thing. And yeah, and we still haven't got it right yet. And we're still in the court system. A lot of the time when I'm listening to decisions that are handed down, it's like the 60s and 70s are still here. Like, it doesn't feel to me as someone in their 50s, the same crap is still going on now in the court system as when I was a child. Like, really? Except it's got worse. Now it's an $80 billion a year industry, whereas back then it wasn't. So the other thing I want to say too is there's a lot of talk, and the legal people might want to know about this. There's talk amongst the adult child community of beginning a class action against the mental health practitioners who have been part of the decisions being made in court that haven't been putting them front and center and taking care of the children and adding to their child's psychological abuse as adults. There's class actions being spoken about now and talked about. And so they're looking at the mental health practitioners who were involved. They're looking at the legal professionals who were involved and fought, you know, did their jobs, but didn't realize by doing their jobs and fighting and making sure their client wins custody for the child and not seeing the other parent and all this other stuff that's going on, they're contributing to abuse. And now they really, really need to get some understanding about what they're actually involved in, because if the class actions start going ahead, people who've been running questionable reunification camps, legal, mental health professionals, what's going to happen in that space if these adult children now start getting together and forming their own, just something to think about, right? Hey, Dawn?
Forming their own conference.
No, not forming their own, but forming their own, you know, legal,
yeah. Well, that's part of the path, is affecting how this is looked at in the legal community with our family court friends, with our law enforcement officers, and our mental health practitioners and professionals. All of it is where we really want to drive this to. So we don't need to talk to the same professionals that have been studying it, like you were talking about. There's a lot of studying and more studying, and
30, 40
we've been
years of
sitting
studying.
here. We're right here. Hello. Yeah. So it's time to shift the tides and change this direction, and affecting real change by those who've experienced it, because we have a voice in there. We can explain and share that information so that decisions can be made that are, you know, well-rounded, that they're informed decisions. But right now you can't ask a child, how do you feel? They don't know how to express that anger, so they're acting out, or they don't know how to analyze, or, you know, can I talk back to my mom? Because that was something I never would have even thought of. So these are things you can't really get from the child. You have to get them from the survivors. And in every other form of abuse, well, nearly, you know, just using child sexual abuse, for example, they have a voice. They are the ones that are invited. And at least you talk about in the mental health, and you have the schizophrenia community who are participants in almost every single organization and conference, to the extent I think you said 60%.
Yeah, absolutely.
They all have lived experience.
My I was previously with the Schizophrenia Fellowship of New South Wales, now known as One Door, and on their board, 60%, I think, was the chartered mandate. 60% of the board members had to have lived experience. And then when we would go to conferences as workers, we would have we had a lot of workers too who were support workers with lived experience. So, and we would have conferences where the majority of the speakers were lived experience speakers. Like,
And how come
this
not
is
in
normal
this
in my
particular?
world, but
Yeah.
then we've got conferences on parental alienation where we're invited to participate and listen to them talking about us, but we're not invited to speak.
We have this.
Correct.
Nothing about us without us.
Correct. So that's
absolutely.
why we started it, because we're like, hang on a second. I come from the model where people with lived experience are actually very valued, versus when we went into the PA world, we're not valued at all. So, and we're here to say, yeah, time's up. Time's up for that. Welcome back, Patty. It's
Make
good
room.
to see you.
We're stepping up to the table.
Yes, thank you. No, and to your point too, Dr. Elise and Sachin, in that with the legal system, it's not that, we're trying to put them to shame or put the blame on them. We're just opening up the dialogue to say, talk to us. We've got the actual experience, and we have the recipe. The recipe's right here. You don't have to cook without or bake, just by your thoughts and say, well, I think there is, what can I help with? Something, the direction of, like, asking a child, as you were saying, sometimes they cannot identify what they're feeling or what just happened. They're in their own world. And
yeah, that's true. They don't necessarily know the difference between being mad and being hurt. They don't know the difference because the development of their brain, the frontal lobe, has not developed enough for them to understand that. So we have to keep that in mind as we are trying to deal with the children. And so how can you possibly study them? I mean, that's an honest answer.
Dawn, you also spoke on the invisible. You want to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, let me correct myself. That is an honest question, not an answer. I'm asking the question, why? So, and as far as being invisible, this is something that I talk about in a couple different ways. And Elise will say that, it's a normalized societal, type of thing that's being accepted. And for me, in my world, I always felt invisible. I didn't feel like people saw me or heard me. And no matter what I did or said, I was just the child in the corner, the one. I'm in the room, but I'm seen and not heard. There was nothing for me to have a voice to, or that had no autonomy at all. So I still struggle today with feeling invisible. And it's something that, in fact, last week at work, I had a legitimate complaint over things that are going on with my team. And it's not necessarily a complaint more than it is a recommendation on how to do it better, is what I wanted to express. So I had to send this information to my boss, and this kind of stuff always comes across for women, because I'm in cybersecurity, it comes across as nagging. So it's something I have to constantly be careful with how I'm being perceived. And that in itself I shouldn't have to be careful of how I'm being perceived. I should be able to just say what's on my mind. So in order for me not to feel invisible, I had to send something and say something, because if I don't, I'm not advocating for myself. And in my efforts to advocate for me and what I need in my role, I had to say something. And I told my boss, look, when we start this conversation, this is my effort to not be invisible. Just so you know, this is where this conversation is coming from. And then we had a decent conversation. So I have to learn how to make sure I'm not invisible, because I'm not the little girl anymore. I'm not the child that's sitting in the corner, seen and not heard. Now I'm being heard. I have a voice and I'm speaking out. So it's just a way of having to practice constantly how to do things that most people learn how to do as a child as they grow. But when you're psychologically abused, you are stunted in a lot of that growth, and you don't have those capabilities and skills like dealing with conflict. You don't have the skill to deal with conflict when you're told to shut up all the time, when you're seen and not heard. So now as an adult, not knowing how to deal with conflict, I repeat the pattern. We repeat the patterns. We marry those patterns because it's familiar. We feel safe. We think it's love. And it's not.
Literally marry them. Literally marry them.
Literally. So, yeah, thanks, Patty, for mentioning the invisible piece.
Dr. Elise, I have a question that just came to me with the invisible piece, Dawn. Do you ever use actual mirrors in any of your cases for them to actually physically be able to see themselves during a session?
Yeah, I've got a huge mirror, actually, as big as the entire whole wall and part of my room. So, yeah, I've got a lot of mindfulness tapestries on the wall and a huge mirror. And, yeah, so depending on what type of work I'm doing. Yeah, and sometimes I work with a lot of people with severe and persistent mental illness, and we'll do some mirror work in that space because a lot of the time they're not realizing how they might be coming across, but that's a totally different field, a totally different conversation to what we're discussing tonight. Excuse me. But I also wanted to say, with regards to the legal system, the two things that go on in the parental alienation world that Dr. Korosi was talking about was the false allegations. And once the false allegations start, all hell breaks loose. And a lot of the time, accusing people of child sexual abuse or domestic violence, which we call the two silver bullets, once they're fired, then everything changes. And you kind of have to prove that it didn't happen. And a lot of people are manipulating the system in this way. And I want to say that one of the adult children that I interviewed, and I interviewed a lot of them for a lot longer. I needed a lot more than an hour. Some of them were several hours long. This one particular girl that I interviewed, she cried for hours just talking about the effects on her now in the society because her father was accused of sexual abuse toward her. That's how the mother got custody. And she said it never happened. It never, ever, ever happened. And she said forever and ever and ever, she's now known as the child who was raped by her father, and her father's known as the pedophile in their community. This is the other thing that I want the legal teams to understand. If you're going to be sort of listening to the false allegations, there's a lot of extra training that needs to be going on in here that's not being done. So we need to be extremely careful with these spaces and think about what's this going to be like for the child. Now, if there is sexual abuse going on, we can tell. There's different testing and there's all different sorts of things that need to be done. But the false allegations, that's a whole different area. And the amount of false allegations that we're seeing coming through the court system is off the charts. So the legal professionals need to be very, very careful within the false allegations spaces, because if we've got alienating and pathogenic parents who are having shared delusions, they're in a delusional state, depending on their personality disorders, They can dream up things, they can believe them, they'll use whatever ever comes in. And some of the lawyers are also guilty of using these, suggesting that these tactics could be going on and planting seeds. So, and then going on to win cases. We've got to really seriously think, what is the long-term repercussions on these children who are hearing this stuff, who are in court? And this particular girl that I interviewed, she went back to the court later, I think it was the court, and she said she wanted to see all the documents from the court case that went for years. They brought out a huge trolley full of all of the notes from the trial, and she read through them. She was mortified what they were saying, and she actually said as soon as she turned 18, she left and went and lived with her dad, and she's been with him ever since. But they are pariahs now. They're pariahs in society. So we have to be very careful within these spaces. Is this true? Is it a false allegation? If it's a false allegation, you're dealing with someone who's very personality disordered and struggling. Don't believe everything you hear. Like, get some professional development about these personalities and what they will go to, the ends they will go to keep children as their regulatory object. I mean, they are absolutely going to throw everything at it they can possibly think of. And in the mind of somebody who's a severe level alienator, they are quite delusional a lot of the time. And growing up with a parent who's quite delusional, and we can watch them do it. We can watch them. They can think one thought and then start to believe it, and then start to believe it, and then try and get us to believe it. And now we're in shared delusional territory with our parent. So we grow up not knowing what's true, what is true, what's not true. So their lies keep us with them. It keeps us enmeshed with them. It keeps us from going anywhere else. We're too terrified a lot of the time to go see our targeted parent, because we don't know what our alienating parent's going to do when we get back, or before the visit or after the visit, and how much are they going to come after us for information. And what if, we had a good visit and we say we had a good visit? That's not a good thing for us when we get back to say that we had a good visit, let me tell you, because that upsets them. It makes them dysregulate. It creates more delusion in their heads. Sometimes I used to hear the narrative, like, oh, well, now he's the good parent, is he? You want to go live with him, do you? Is this what's going on? And then they'll come at you. So we learn very quickly, shut up, regulate the parent. No, we don't want to see our other parents. It's too dangerous to love our other parent. We have to completely be here and regulate this parent, because we're in coercive control. We don't have voices. We don't have power. We're screwed. And if this parent is going into court fighting for custody of us, and we're already in this coercive control relationship, they're going to tell lawyers whatever the hell they need to tell them to accuse them of stuff to keep us. So this area, you guys need a lot of professional development in. You need to go get it, because you're dealing with people who can be very, very disordered and very dangerous.
Absolutely.
There.
Yeah. I want to take a second, because we're going to need to move on to the next section, but I want to share this screen really fast. So thank you for sharing all that information regarding how we have to be very careful. Walking on eggshells is what a lot of us call it. We always have to be cognizant of our environment. It creates a hypervigilance, and it's a lot of cortisol going through us 24/7. So that leads right back into your study about the autoimmune diseases. So, I mean, all of this is constant for children, and this is why we're here. We're here to try and stop that, because we know what it's like. We know what it's like to have to regulate our parents, and that's not our job. We're a child. We're supposed to learn and grow as a child to become a living and thriving and a decent member of society and a community of people that are successful, not trying to figure out how to deal with conflict or learning things they should have learned as a kid. So thank you for all of that. That really helps, I think, explain it for everybody. I wanted to remind everybody that by participating in this the conference, both yesterday and today's in full, and then when we were doing or planning the live, we were going to have a dinner theater, and we were going to show the Erasing Family documentary, which is part of the CLEs for the Florida Bar. So since we're not having the dinner theater, you can watch Erasing Family free on YouTube or Tubi, or there's ways that you can watch it for free online. You can also go to erasingfamily.org, and I think you can play it right from there. So these attending both days and watching the film, you can earn 15 CLEs or CEUs if you can do the self-reporting. 7 of those 15 actually count towards your mental health requirements. So this is really I think this is a really good advantage for those that are seeking those CLEs, which is continuing legal education for those that have not heard of CLEs. We normally hear CEUs, or I think the mental health and the medical field have different acronyms. So if your industry or your state or your country allows for you to do the self-reporting that you have attended something like this, then you can potentially claim them as well. So I just wanted to share this with everybody really fast. We will have these available on demand. It's not going to be right away. It's probably take us a couple weeks or so to get these uploaded into the LMS system. So they'll be forthcoming, hopefully before the end of the year. I know the holidays are coming, so we'll try our best to get the replays out there for everybody, or the on demand, I mean, so that these can continue to be accessed and utilized and help with the education piece of it. And while I'm sharing my screen, I also want to talk about our book. So as you know, we just recently published our first ever anthology for adult survivors. This has never been done before, that a group of adult survivors of child psychological abuse came together and wrote their stories and their hope and resilience. So it's not about just the story, it's about what we're doing to make a difference in the world. And all of our authors spoke about their piece, and resilience really is the theme word in everything. So congratulations to all of our authors that participated in the book. They are now international #1 bestsellers. And I just wanted to throw this up here. If you haven't seen the book yet, that QR code will take you right to the Amazon site where you can see the book. It's available on Kindle, paperback, and hard copy. So yeah, I just wanted to, anybody want to talk about their experience on the book really fast? We only have a couple minutes.
This is just an incredible book, and it is, as we shared yesterday, Dawn, the foreword, I think it's the foreword that is written by Martin Mangello. Mm-hmm. Is that right? And there are so many, yes, the stories that are in here are truly, truly heartfelt, and they're lived experiences. But it shows that it doesn't matter who you are, in what, there's no title or status in class for a societal, if it is the poverty level or if it is the professional level. This has affected everybody globally, not everybody, but people across the globe. And it is also a book, not only just a book, it is truly something, a guide, a resource. There's information in here to elevate where we were and where we are going with the knowledge, the skills, and the understanding of the victims. of the individuals who truly have the experience that can speak to it. And I think, and I feel deeply within my heart of hearts, that this is what the legal system needs to hear, because they don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
And you meaning the authors, and you and Dr. Elise, the professionals behind this, can speak to it on a professional level versus just on an everyday individual. You have the knowledge to put it in a frame that would make it more understandable and to assist the legal system, the mental health system, and corporate HRs, especially not to leave any organization out, but there is an opportunity here to elevate where we were to make it better. And truly, my mantra is making a difference. This book is making a difference. Each one of you are making a difference. And Dr. Elise and Dawn, to combine and not just have a book out there, and hope that someone will read it. By having this conference, it ties together and elevates exactly what is being said in the book, but we are adding, this is of added value, the speakers that you have, what you are doing and how you are doing it. Very, very professional. Yes, we encourage people to go to Amazon.com. There is a Kindle, there is a paperback, and I think there's a hard copy now. Yes, Dawn?
Yeah, and I just wanted to show people that the book is a resource, so it's not just our stories. We've added in a lot of information as well. So for example, and I really want to put this here because I think I'm speaking next, and I want to let everybody know that just a disclosure that if there's anything that makes you feel like emotionally you need to step away for a second or take a breath, I want you to know that we support you. I just want to give a little bit of a heads up about some of the things that we might be talking about throughout the rest of the day, because we are talking about a little bit more on abduction. So Shasheen shared yesterday about abduction, so did Dr. Elise, and we're going to have some more conversations today about abduction. So I just want to tell everybody that we understand that things can be triggering, and we're here, and we will understand if you need to take a break or step away, come back. But we did provide this in the book as well. So it is part of the book that we want people to know that there's resources out there. And if something is striking you, then embrace it and let it come, and so that you can begin that journey of healing and understanding and accepting. We can have our emotions, but we can also organize them. We can work on our own development, and sometimes in order to do that, we have to have a shakeup. So when something is shaking you to your core, that's somewhere you need to pay attention to. So don't run from it, run to it, but run to it carefully and cautiously. Make sure you have someone to speak to, some kind of support. If you don't have anybody or anybody near you at the moment, we do have this information in here. So the crisis lifeline, the crisis text line, the want to talk about it, this is a great resource here. Then there's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the Samaritans for the UK and Ireland, and we even have a lifeline for Australia. So you do have resources out there. Friends and family are also great resources when you just need to speak or talk about something. The Senpai is another resource tool. So there's lots of tools that we're going to be sharing. Then I want to show that we have information about the authors, and at the end of this book, there's a lot of descriptions. What is child psychological abuse related to parental and family alienation and abduction? That's in there. We have the criteria of how to do you identify as an alienated child? Maybe you don't know yet. So we have questions in there that you can go through and you can answer to see if this is something that you can find that answer to your questions without having to, in a safe way, because you can read it privately and you don't have to worry about having to ask someone out loud until you're ready. And once you're ready, then you can go that and take that extra step.